Painter buys a derelict property to renovate, but the discovery in the basement leaves him stunned. Daniel Johnson signed the final documents with trembling hands. 40 years of life, 20 of them spent painting other people's houses, and he had finally managed to save enough money to buy his own space. The old house in downtown Savannah had cost him all his savings, every penny put aside with sacrifice over the years. No sooner had he finished taking the keys from the realtor than Daniel was eager to get started. He wanted to turn that old place into his dream studio, a space where he could finally paint his own canvases, not just walls for hurried clients. The property had been closed up for years, according to the realtor, and would need a lot of work. But Daniel didn't mind. He had time, energy, and, above all, a dream that kept him awake every night. The next day, he arrived early at the property. The facade needed a new coat of paint. The windows were dusty and the front yard looked like a small jungle. But it was his. All his. Daniel smiled as he opened the rusty gate. The screeching sound of metal against metal echoed down the quiet street. "Good morning," a voice greeted him from behind. Daniel turned and saw a white-haired lady standing on the sidewalk. She must have been about 70, wearing a floral robe and holding a cup of coffee. She lived next door, he assumed. "Good morning, Ma'am. Are you new here?" she asked, though her eyes revealed she already knew the answer. "I'm the new owner, Daniel Johnson." He extended his hand. The lady hesitated before briefly shaking his hand. "Margaret Wilson. I've lived here for 50 years. She took a sip of coffee. "You bought this house?" "Yes, I did. I'm going to renovate it and turn it into my studio." Margaret's face changed. The friendly expression gave way to something Daniel couldn't quite decipher. Worry? Disapproval? "You shouldn't have bought this house," she said, her voice low but firm. Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Why? Is there some serious structural problem I don't know about?" "It's not that." Margaret looked at the house with an old sadness in her eyes. "This house has a history that shouldn't be disturbed." "Every old house has history, Mrs. Wilson. That's part of the charm." "This one has more than charm," she murmured. "It has secrets. Secrets the former owner wanted to take with her." Before Daniel could ask anything more, Margaret turned her back and returned to her house. The door closed with a sharp thud that seemed to echo louder than it should. Daniel stood still for a moment, confused by the interaction. Strange neighbors, he thought, probably just a lonely lady who liked to create mysteries where there were none. He shrugged and entered the property. The inside of the house was surprisingly well preserved, considering the years of neglect. The furniture was still there, covered with white sheets that had gathered dust. The air was heavy, filled with that characteristic smell of places long closed up. Daniel opened some windows to let the air circulate. He walked through the rooms, making a mental list of what he would need to do. The main room would be perfect for displaying canvases. The kitchen needed a complete renovation. The upstairs bedrooms could become spaces for painting classes in the future. Everything was taking shape in his mind. It was when he reached the door leading to the basement. The wood was swollen from moisture, and Daniel had to force it quite a bit to open it. The hinges protested with a sharp groan. A steep staircase descended into darkness. He grabbed the flashlight he had brought in his backpack and carefully started to go down. The basement was larger than he expected. The low ceiling made the space feel claustrophobic, and there were boxes stacked on all sides. Daniel swept the flashlight beam across the stone walls. It would take a lot of work down there, too. Maybe he could turn the basement into a storage area for paints and materials. While exploring the space, his foot hit something loose on the floor. He lowered the flashlight and saw that one of the floor stones was out of place. Out of curiosity, Daniel crouched down and tried to move it. The stone came out with surprising ease, revealing a hole in the ground. Inside the hole was a rusty metal box. Daniel's heart raced. He carefully picked up the box and brought it into the flashlight's beam. It wasn't locked. When he opened it, he found something completely unexpected. Letters. Dozens of them. All yellowed with time, handwritten in a delicate, old-fashioned script. Daniel carefully picked one up and began to read by the flashlight's light. "My forbidden love. Every day away from you is an eternity of suffering. My heart bleeds for not being able to shout to the four winds that I love you. This cruel society separates us, but know that my love for you will never die. I will meet you again tonight in the garden, where we can be ourselves, even if only for a few stolen minutes. Yours forever, even if the world says otherwise. E. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. There was something deeply intimate and painful in those words. He picked up another letter. My dear, I dreamed of you again. I dreamed that we lived in a world where our love was not a scandal, where we could walk hand in hand without judgmental looks. But I wake up, and reality crushes me again. My family will never accept it. Your social status, your condition, your profession, everything is used against us. Still, I choose you. I choose you every day, even knowing I cannot have you. E. There were at least 50 letters there, all signed only with the letter E, all speaking of an impossible love, of secret meetings of pain and desire. Daniel spent almost an hour reading, completely absorbed by that story from decades ago. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. When he finally came up from the basement, the daylight had already changed. Daniel placed the box with the letters on the kitchen table and stared at them, lost in thought. Who was E? And who was the beloved person who could never be theirs? Why were these letters hidden in the basement? He thought of Margaret, the neighbor. She had said the house had secrets. Was this what she was talking about? Daniel decided he needed to talk to her again. Maybe the lady knew something about the story behind those letters. He carefully put them back in the box and went to the house next door. Margaret took a while to answer the doorbell. When she finally opened the door, her face showed a tired expression. Yes? Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Wilson. I found something in the house. I was wondering if you could help me understand. Her eyes narrowed. Found what? Letters. Old love letters, hidden in the basement. Margaret's face visibly paled. She gripped the door more tightly, as if needing support. So it's begun, she murmured. Begun what? Margaret looked around, as if checking if anyone was listening, then gestured for Daniel to come in. Her house was the opposite of the one he had bought, small but extremely tidy and cozy. It smelled of coffee and homemade cake. Sit down, she indicated the living room sofa. Daniel obeyed, still holding the box with the letters. Margaret prepared 2 coffees and brought a plate of cookies before sitting in the armchair opposite him. The lady who lived in that house was named Eleanor Bennet, Margaret began, her voice low and laden with memories. I met her when I was young, newly married. Eleanor was already a mature woman then. She must have been about 50 when we met. Very elegant, always well dressed, but with a sadness in her eyes that no one could ignore. Daniel took a sip of coffee, attentive to every word. Eleanor never married. She lived alone in that enormous house. She had a niece who visited sometimes, a spoiled girl named Victoria. Eleanor's family had money, a lot of money. They had been important here in Savannah for generations. And the letters? Asked Daniel. Margaret sighed deeply. Eleanor had a great love when she was young, a love that her family never accepted. He was a painter, the young man, a house painter, actually. He worked in renovations, painting houses, an honest worker but poor, and that for the Bennet family was unforgivable. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. A painter, like him. What happened to them? They were forcibly separated. Eleanor's family threatened him, paid him to leave town. The young man tried to resist, but he didn't have the means to fight against a powerful family. He ended up leaving, and Eleanor never saw him again. She spent the rest of her life waiting for him, believing that one day he would return, but he never did. That's terrible, Daniel murmured. It's worse than terrible. Eleanor wasted away from sadness. She fulfilled the social obligations her family demanded, attended events, kept up appearances. But inside she was empty. I could see it. We lived next door to each other for decades, and I saw how she looked out the window every day, as if expecting to see someone arriving. She raised her niece Victoria as if she were her own daughter. after the girl's parents passed away in an accident. She devoted herself completely to raising the girl, perhaps trying to fill the void that her lost love had left. And the niece? Victoria grew up spoiled, overprotected. Eleanor didn't let the girl go out much, didn't let her have boyfriends. I think she was afraid that Victoria would go through the same pain she did, but the result was that Victoria became a bitter, controlling woman. She must be about 50 now, lives in an apartment downtown. Never married either. Daniel picked up one of the letters. Are these letters from Eleanor? Probably. She wrote to him even after he left. My husband, before he passed, told me that he once saw Eleanor going to the post office with a stack of letters. She never mailed any, just kept them. I think it was her way of keeping the love alive, you know. Writing letters that would never be read. Mrs. Wilson, do you know his name? The name of the man Eleanor loved. The neighbor thought for a moment. Johnson. His last name was Johnson. William Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. William Johnson, the painter. Daniel nearly dropped his cup. Johnson, like my last name? Margaret looked at him with a strange expression. Your last name is Johnson too? Yes. Daniel Johnson. A heavy silence filled the room. Margaret and Daniel looked at each other, both processing the coincidence. It might just be a coincidence, said Margaret, but her voice didn't sound convincing. Johnson is a common last name. Yes, agreed Daniel, but his heart was racing. He thought of his father, who rarely spoke about the family. He thought about how little he knew about his paternal grandparents. His father had always been closed off about the past, changing the subject whenever Daniel asked about the family history. Mrs. Wilson, when did this William Johnson leave town? Oh, let me think. It was in 1958, maybe 1959, over 60 years ago. Daniel quickly did the math. If this William was in his early 20s at the time, he'd be over 80 now, the age his paternal grandfather would be, if he were still alive. But Daniel had never met his paternal grandfather. The man had abandoned the family when Daniel's father was just a child. My grandfather, Daniel said slowly, was also named William Johnson. My father never wanted to talk much about him. He just said his father abandoned him when he was 5 and never got in touch again. Margaret brought her hand to her mouth. My God, do you think... I don't know what to think. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. It might just be a coincidence, or it might be that my grandfather is the same man who loved Mrs. Eleanor. If that's true, it would be a cruel irony, murmured Margaret. You buying her house of all places. Or it might be fate. Daniel looked at the box of letters. Maybe I bought this house for a reason, to discover this story, to understand what happened. Margaret stayed silent for a long moment, then said, I have to warn you about something else. Victoria, Eleanor's niece, will be very unhappy to learn you bought the house. She always thought the property should have been hers. There was a nasty fight when Eleanor decided to sell before leaving. The house was sold through a broker, very quickly and discreetly. Victoria tried to stop it but couldn't. She was furious. Is Eleanor still alive? Asked Daniel. No. She passed away 2 years ago, but before going she made arrangements for the house to be sold. I think she didn't want Victoria to have it. They fought a lot in recent years. Victoria wanted Eleanor to sell the house and move in with her at the apartment, but Eleanor refused. She said that house held her most precious memories. Daniel spent the rest of the afternoon talking with Margaret, who told him various details about Eleanor and her lonely life. When he finally returned to his home, the sun was already setting. He looked at the property with different eyes now. It wasn't just an old house. It was the setting of a lost love story, of shattered dreams, of an entire life lived in solitude. That night Daniel could barely sleep. He kept reading and rereading the letters, trying to understand the woman who had written them. Eleanor seemed intelligent, sensitive, deeply in love. The letters revealed not just love, but also anger against the social injustices that prevented her from being with the one she loved. She questioned conventions, but at the same time felt trapped by them. In one of the longest letters, Eleanor wrote, My beloved William, Today marks 6 months since you left. 6 months, that feel like 6 years. My father told me you accepted the money they offered and left without looking back. But I don't believe it. I can't believe our love meant so little to you. I know they forced you to go. I know they threatened you. I know my father. I know how far he's willing to go to protect the family name. But here I am, the obedient daughter, pretending I'm fine, pretending my heart isn't shattered into 1,000 pieces. I'm engaged now. My father chose a man for me, someone from our social class, someone approved by society. But I don't love this man. I will never love anyone but you. I will marry because I have no choice, but my heart will always be yours. Always. E. Daniel felt tears burning his eyes. That pain was so real, so visceral, even after so many decades. He had never married. At 40 years old, he'd had some relationships, but nothing that lasted long. He had always been afraid of giving himself completely, of being vulnerable. And now, reading those letters, he wondered if that fear hadn't come from somewhere deeper. If he somehow carried the trauma of his grandfather's abandonment, even without ever having known him. In the following days, Daniel began renovating the house. He hired some helpers and started with the most urgent repairs, but his mind was divided. Half of him focused on the work, the other half couldn't stop thinking about the letters, about Eleanor, about William Johnson. It was on a Thursday morning, while working in the main room, that he heard the doorbell ring. He opened the door and found himself facing a woman in her 50s, very well dressed, with blonde hair pulled back into an impeccable bun. Her eyes were hard, calculating. "Are you the new owner?" she asked without greeting him. "I am. Daniel Johnson." "Victoria Bennett." She did not extend her hand. "We need to talk." Daniel invited her in, though he already knew the conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Victoria looked around the room with an expression of disapproval. "This house belonged to my aunt. She raised me like her own daughter after my parents passed away. I grew up here." "I'm sorry for your loss," Daniel said sincerely. "You shouldn't have bought this house." Victoria stared at him. "The sale was irregular. My aunt wasn't in her right mind when she decided to sell. I am the rightful heir." "I have all the documents in order." Daniel kept his voice calm. "The realtor assured me everything was legal." "Realtor?" Victoria laughed humorlessly. "A profiteer who convinced a confused elderly lady to sell for a ridiculous price. My aunt was worth far more than what you paid." "It was the listed price. I paid what was being asked." "That doesn't change the fact that the sale was fraudulent. I have lawyers reviewing the situation. I will contest this purchase in court." Daniel felt a weight in his stomach. He had used all his savings on this house. If he lost in court, he'd be left with nothing. "Look, Miss Victoria, I understand you have an emotional connection to this house, but—" "You understand nothing," she interrupted him. "My aunt dedicated her entire life to raising me. She sacrificed everything for me. This house should be mine. It's my right." "If you'll allow me to ask, why did your aunt decide to sell?" Victoria's face turned red. "Because she was senile. She no longer knew what she was doing." "That's not what Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor, told me," Daniel spoke, before thinking better of it. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "That old gossip has already poisoned you against me? Typical. She never liked me, always took my aunt's side in everything." "She just told me a bit about the house's history." "History?" Victoria practically spat the word. "What story did she tell about my aunt's great lost love? About the poor painter her family drove away? Those are romantic fantasies of a woman who didn't know how to live in the real world." Daniel felt a pang of anger. "With all due respect, Miss Victoria, but your aunt seems to have loved that man deeply. The letters—" Victoria froze. "Letters? What letters?" Daniel realized too late he had said too much. "I found some old letters in the basement. Love letters your aunt wrote. Show them to me." "Now," Victoria's voice was an order. "I can't do that. They're private, personal. This house and everything in it should be mine." Victoria took a threatening step toward Daniel. "Those letters are my family's property. You have no right to read them." "I do. I bought the house and everything in it legally." Victoria took a deep breath, clearly trying to control herself. "I'll make an offer. I'll pay triple what you paid for the house. You take the money, leave, and never come back here. Everyone's happy. I'm not interested in selling, Daniel said firmly. This house is important to me. Important? Victoria laughed scornfully. You bought it less than a week ago. What could possibly be important to you here? Daniel thought about telling her about the possible connection to his grandfather, but something made him hesitate. He didn't want to give more information to this woman who clearly saw the house only as property, not as the home it had been. It's important because I've chosen to make this place my studio, my dream. Dream. Victoria repeated the word with disdain. Everyone has dreams. The question is, who has the right to fulfill them? And you, Mr. Johnson, have no claim to this house. The courts will decide that. They certainly will. And when they rule in my favor, you'll lose everything you've invested here. Think carefully before refusing my offer. Victoria slammed the door as she left. Daniel stood frozen in the empty living room, his heart racing. For the first time since buying the house, he felt genuine fear of losing it. Victoria seemed determined. She had resources, she had lawyers. And him. He only had the documents the realtor had provided and the hope that everything was truly in order. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Daniel decided he needed help. He called the realtor who had brokered the sale, a man named Richard Taylor. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. Daniel left a message asking the realtor to call back urgently. He then began examining all the purchase documents more carefully. Everything seemed to be in order. The deed was registered, taxes were paid, there were no pending issues. But one doubt gnawed at him. What if Victoria was right? What if there really was something irregular about the sale? He decided to find a lawyer the next day. He couldn't remain passive waiting for Victoria to sue him. He needed to protect himself. But lawyers were expensive, and he had already spent all his savings on the house. He'd have to take out a loan or maybe accept some extra painting jobs to save up money. His cell phone rang. It was Margaret. Daniel, I just saw Victoria leaving your house. She looked furious. What happened? Daniel told her about the visit and the threats. I warned you she'd show up, Margaret sighed. Victoria never accepts losing. But don't worry too much. I think she's bluffing. How can you be sure? Because I knew Eleanor very well in recent years. She was completely lucid when she decided to sell. She even talked to me about it. She said she didn't want Victoria to have the house because her niece never understood the real value of that place. To Victoria, it was just expensive property. To Eleanor, it was the temple of her memories. But Victoria said she'll contest the sale. She can try, but she won't succeed. Eleanor left everything very well documented. She was a smart woman. She knew her niece would cause trouble. That's why she took all legal precautions. Margaret's words brought some comfort, but Daniel still felt apprehensive. He spent the following days working on the renovation, but always with an edge of anxiety. Richard, the realtor, hadn't returned his call. Daniel tried several times, but the phone either went to voicemail or kept ringing until it disconnected. That's when the first accident happened. Daniel was upstairs, painting one of the bedrooms, when he heard a crash from below. He rushed down and found one of the main living room windows completely shattered. On the floor, amid the glass shards, was a large rock. The helpers working with him ran to see what had happened. Someone threw a rock from the street, said Mike, one of the painters Daniel had hired. Daniel went to the broken window and looked outside. The street was empty. Whoever had done it had already fled. He felt a chill. Was it just random vandalism, or was someone trying to scare him? 2 days later, while working in the basement, the wooden staircase leading upstairs gave way under his weight. Daniel fell, hitting his shoulder on the stone floor. The pain was intense, but fortunately, nothing was broken. When he examined the staircase, he noticed that some steps appeared to have been partially sawed, so they would give way under pressure. Now there was no more doubt. Someone was sabotaging the renovation. "Boss, this isn't an accident," said Mike, examining the damaged steps. "Someone did this on purpose." "I know." Daniel massaged his sore shoulder. "Want me to call someone? We should file a report." Daniel thought of Victoria. Would she be capable of something like this? Of putting his safety at risk just to force him to give up the house? Or would it be someone else? But who? No, he said finally. Let's just be more careful from now on, and I'll install some security cameras. But the incidents continued. A week later, he discovered that someone had mixed dirt into the paint cans, ruining expensive materials. Then, tools started disappearing mysteriously from the construction site. And one morning, he found graffiti on the exterior walls he had just painted. The helpers were getting nervous. Mike even suggested they stop the renovation until they found out who was doing it. "I can't stop," said Daniel. "If I stop, whoever is doing this wins." It was Margaret who brought important information. She showed up at Daniel's house one afternoon with an agitated expression. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. I remembered a detail about William Johnson, the man Eleanor loved." "What is it?" "He didn't just paint houses. He was an artist too. He painted canvases. Eleanor showed me some once, stored in the attic. They were beautiful, very talented. He signed the canvases with the initials W.J. Daniel's heart raced." "The attic? I haven't been up there yet." "The stairs were too damaged. I had to replace them. Maybe you should go up now that you have new stairs. You might find something interesting." Daniel didn't waste any time. As soon as Margaret left, he went up to the attic. The space was hot and dusty, with several boxes stacked and old furniture covered by sheets. He started searching, moving boxes, opening old trunks. It was in a corner of the attic, covered by a thick cloth, that he found the canvases. There were at least 10 paintings, all framed, all signed with W.J. in the lower right corner. Daniel brought them to the light coming through the small attic window and examined them one by one. They were stunning. Landscapes of Savannah, portraits of ordinary people, scenes of everyday life painted with sensitivity and technique. But it was the last canvas that left him breathless. It was a portrait of a young woman, about 20-something years old. Loose black hair, deep dark eyes, a gentle smile on her lips. It was painted with so much love, with so much delicacy, that Daniel could feel the artist's emotion in every brush stroke. And on the back of the canvas, handwritten, "To Eleanor, my eternal love. May this painting preserve your beauty forever, since I cannot keep you. W.J., 1958. Daniel sat on the dusty attic floor, holding that portrait, and cried. He cried for that lost love, for those 2 lives wasted in loneliness, for the injustice of it all. And he cried for himself too, for his own fears, for all the times he had closed himself off to love for fear of getting hurt. At that moment, something changed inside him. It was no longer just about saving the house. It was about honoring that love that never had a chance to blossom. It was about discovering the full truth of the story and perhaps finding some kind of redemption. He came down from the attic, carefully carrying the canvases. He needed to know more. He needed to find out what had happened to William Johnson. If he really was his grandfather, there was a family story he needed to know. And even if he wasn't, the story of William and Eleanor deserved to be told, to be remembered. It was then that he thought, if William were still alive, he would be over 80 years old. Where would he be? Would he have stayed in Savannah? Would he have gone to another city? Or would he have passed away too? Daniel picked up the phone and called Margaret again. "Mrs. Wilson, do you have any idea where William Johnson went when he left Savannah?" Let me think. I think I heard back then that he had gone to New York City, but I'm not sure. It was so long ago. And you never heard from him after that?" "No." It was as if he had vanished. Eleanor tried to look for him for years, but never managed to find him. I think he really wanted to disappear. Or was forced to disappear, thought Daniel. He knew stories of how powerful families dealt with people they considered undesirable. It wasn't hard to imagine that Eleanor's family had taken steps to ensure William never came back. That night, Daniel stayed up late researching online. He searched for William Johnson in New York City, but the name was too common. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of people with that name. How to find the right person? He then decided to try a different approach. He called his father. "Dad, I need to ask you some questions about Grandpa William." There was silence on the other end of the line. His father, James Johnson, never liked talking about the father who had abandoned him. "Daniel, you know I don't like talking about that." "I know, Dad, but it's important. Very important. I need to know where he was born, where he lived before he left." "Why this sudden interest?" Daniel took a deep breath and told him about the house, about the letters, about Eleanor, and the possibility that his grandfather was the same William Johnson she had loved. His father was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with emotion. "Savannah. He was from Savannah. I was born there, but my mother took me to New York when I was 5, after he left. She never wanted to go back there, said that city only brought pain." "And was he a painter?" "Yes. He painted houses for a living, but he also painted pictures. My mother burned them all after he left, said she didn't want anything that reminded her of him." "Dad, I think I found his paintings, and I think I know why he left." Daniel spent the next hour telling the whole story to his father. When he finished, James was crying on the other end of the line. "So he didn't abandon us because he didn't love us," said his father, his voice breaking. "He was forced to leave." "It seems so. My mother never knew that. She spent her whole life hating my father, thinking he had left us by choice. She passed away 10 years ago, still believing that." "I'm sorry, Dad." "Me too, but now at least I know the truth." "Ow. My father wasn't the coward I always thought he was. Do you have any idea where he might be now?" "No. After he left, we never heard from him again. My mother said he didn't even try to get in touch, but now, knowing all this, I realize he was probably prevented from looking for us." Daniel thought for a moment. "Dad, if he were over 80 now and living in New York, where would he be? Is there any place that would make sense?" "If he doesn't have family to take care of him, he'd probably be in some care home. But there are so many in New York, son. How are you going to search?" "I don't know, but I'll try." Daniel spent the following days working on the renovation during the day and looking for William Johnson at night. He called several care homes in New York City, giving the description and name. Most said they didn't have anyone by that name. Some had William Johnsons, but when Daniel asked for more details, he realized it wasn't the right person. Too young, or different background, or other children. He was starting to lose hope when, on a Thursday night, he called Sunset Haven Care Home, a care home in the northern part of New York. "Good evening. I'm looking for a gentleman named William Johnson. He would be about 85 years old or so. He was a painter." The receptionist on the other end was silent for a moment. "We do have a Mr. William here. Let me check the registry. Yes, William Johnson, 86 years old. I don't know if he was a painter, but sometimes I see him making drawings." Daniel's heart almost stopped. "May I visit him?" "Yes, you may. Visiting hours are from 9 to 5. Are you family?" Daniel hesitated. Would he be? If he were really his grandfather, yes, but what if he wasn't? I'm trying to confirm if he's my grandfather." "I see. Well, Mr. William hasn't had visitors in years. I think he'll be happy to have company." Daniel wrote down the address and planned to go the next day. He spent the whole night awake, rehearsing what he would say, imagining what the meeting would be like. The next morning, he took the bus to New York City very early. The trip took almost 2 hours. Throughout the journey, Daniel held the box with Eleanor's letters and one of the paintings, her portrait that William had made. Sunset Haven Care Home was a simple but well-kept building, painted white with a small garden in front. Daniel entered and introduced himself at the reception. "I'm here to visit Mr. William Johnson." The receptionist smiled. "That's great, he'll be very pleased. He's in room 12 on the 2nd floor, but I warn you that he doesn't hear very well and sometimes gets confused." Daniel went up the stairs with trembling legs. He stopped in front of room 12, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Come in," came a weak voice from inside. Daniel opened the door and saw an elderly man sitting in a chair near the window. He was thin, with completely white hair, his face wrinkled with age. But when he turned to see who had entered, Daniel recognized something in his eyes. They were the eyes of an artist, eyes that had seen the world with sensitivity. "Good afternoon," said Daniel, his voice shaking. "Mr. William Johnson." "Yes, that's me." "Who are you, young man?" Daniel entered the room and closed the door. "My name is Daniel Johnson. I think I'm your grandson." The old man went completely still, his eyes wide. "My grandson? James? Are you James's son?" "Yes, I am." William brought his hands to his face and began to cry. Daniel approached, not quite sure what to do. Finally, he knelt beside his grandfather's chair. "How is your father? How is James? Is he well?" "He's well. He lives in New York, works in a mechanic's shop. He has a good life." "And does he know you're here? That you looked for me?" "He knows. He's the one who helped me find you. Or rather, confirm that you existed." "After all these years," William held Daniel's hand with surprising strength, "I thought they hated me, that they never wanted to see me again." "It's not quite like that." Daniel pulled up a chair and sat next to his grandfather. "Let me tell you a story about a house in Savannah and the letters I found hidden in the basement." For the next 40 minutes, Daniel told everything. About how he had bought Eleanor's house, about the love letters, about Margaret and her stories, about the paintings in the attic. And he showed the box with the letters. When he saw the letters, William began to cry convulsively. He took them with trembling hands and read a few, his lips moving silently. "She wrote to me," he murmured. "Even after everything, she wrote to me." "She loved you," Daniel said softly. "And from what I read in the letters, she never stopped loving you. I loved her too, more than anything, but I had no choice. Her family, they were powerful. They threatened me, threatened to hurt my family, my mother, my brother. They offered me money to leave and never come back. I refused at first, said I'd rather be poor with Eleanor than rich without her. But then—" William stopped, his voice choked. "Then what, Grandpa?" "Then they did something that broke me. They spread rumors about me in town, horrible rumors, that I had done terrible things. Suddenly no one wanted to hire me anymore. Old clients cancelled their jobs. People crossed the street when they saw me. And worse, they started looking badly at my family too. My mother lost her job at the house where she worked. My youngest brother was expelled from school. But that wasn't your fault. I know, but it was because of me, because of my love for Eleanor. I realized that as long as I stayed, my family would suffer. So I accepted the money they offered. I went to New York, tried to start over. I met James's mother, married her. But I could never be a good husband. My heart was still with Eleanor. I drank a lot back then, trying to forget. It was terrible for my wife and for James. Finally, when James was 5, my wife asked me to leave. She said it was better for him to grow up without a father than with a father who was always absent, always lost in memories of another love. "And you agreed to go?" "I agreed because she was right. I wasn't good for them. I wasn't good for anyone. I spent the following years working, surviving. I never painted again, I couldn't. Art had been my way of expressing love, and without Eleanor I no longer felt anything worth expressing." "Grandpa, Eleanor never forgot you. She spent her whole life waiting for you." "I know now." William looked at the letters. "But at the time I thought she would have moved on, that she would have married, had a happy life. I thought it was better that way. Better for her to forget me and be happy than to be stuck in a memory." "She was stuck anyway," Daniel said softly. "And so were you." The old man nodded, tears rolling down his wrinkled face. "We wasted our lives. Two fools in love who let the world decide our fate instead of fighting. It's not too late to do something." Daniel picked up the portrait he had brought and showed it to his grandfather. "You painted this for her. She kept it in the attic all these years." When William saw the portrait, his reaction was visceral. He took it as if it were the most precious thing in the world, ran his fingers over the painting with reverence. "I remember making this, every brush stroke, every color. She sat for me for hours, just laughing and talking. It was one of the happiest days of my life." She kept your paintings, she kept your memories. Her house. It's a temple to your love. Can I visit the house? Asked William, his voice full of hope and fear. Just once, just to feel like I'm close to her again. Of course, Grandpa, whenever you want. They talked for a few more hours. William told stories about his romance with Eleanor, about the secret meetings, about the plans they made to run away together, but never had the courage to carry out. Daniel told him about Victoria and the legal threats. That Victoria, said William sadly. Eleanor told me about her in the last letters. Said she was raising her niece, but the girl was difficult, demanding. Eleanor wanted to give her the love she couldn't give to her own children, because she never wanted to have children with another man, but I think Victoria never understood that. Daniel started going to the care home to visit his grandfather every weekend. With each visit, he brought more letters, more stories about the house renovation. William seemed to be reborn with each meeting. He started drawing again, making little sketches that he gave as gifts to his grandson. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. It was during one of these visits that Daniel told him about the sabotage and accidents that were happening at the house. I'm sure it's Victoria, said Daniel, or someone she hired. She wants to force me to give up on the house. William thought for a moment. Daniel, you said you found the letters in the basement, hidden under a loose stone. Yes. Eleanor showed me that hiding spot once, said it was where she kept her most precious things. But it wasn't just there. There was another hiding spot in the house, one that only she and I knew about. It's in the office, behind the fireplace. The office? I haven't moved much in there yet. The fireplace is covered in soot. Behind the fireplace there's a compartment. You need to remove specific bricks to access it. If Eleanor followed the pattern, she must have stored something important there too. Daniel felt a wave of excitement. Perhaps there were more things in the house, more pieces to the puzzle of Eleanor and William's love story. Grandpa, could you come with me to the house and show me where this compartment is? William's eyes lit up. I'd love to. I've wanted to see that house again for so long. The following week, Daniel picked up William from the care home. The old man was dressed in his best clothes, having even shaved specially for the occasion. The nurse helped him into the car Daniel had rented. The trip back to Savannah was emotional. William looked out the window with teary eyes, recognizing places, commenting on changes. When they reached the street where the house stood, he asked Daniel to stop the car for a moment. I used to come here every night, said William, looking at the house. I'd stand across the street in the shadows just to see Eleanor through the window. Just knowing she was there, a few meters away, made me feel less alone. When they entered the house, William seemed to be transported decades into the past. He walked through the rooms, touching the walls, caressing the windows. He stopped in the main room, where an old piano stood that Daniel hadn't decided what to do with yet. She played the piano, murmured William. She played Chopin. I used to sit there. He pointed to a corner of the room, and she played just for me. She said I was the only one who truly appreciated her music, who understood the emotions she put into every note. Margaret, whom Daniel had informed about the visit, appeared at the door. William? She said, her voice trembling. William Johnson. The old man turned and looked at her. It took a moment, but then his eyes lit up with recognition. Maggie? You were the young girl who lived next door. Married Henry from the grocery store. That was me. Margaret entered, wiping tears from her eyes. My God, it's been so many years. I thought you had already passed. I almost did a few times. But something always kept me here. I think it was the hope that one day I could return to this place. The three of them talked for a while, Margaret and William exchanging old memories. Then Daniel remembered the main reason for the visit. Grandpa, the secret compartment. Oh yes, let's go to the study. The study was at the back of the house, a smaller room with built-in shelves and an old fireplace. Daniel had left that room for last in the renovation because he wasn't sure how to use the space. William went straight to the fireplace and began examining the bricks. "It's these here," he said, pointing to 3 specific bricks on the right side of the fireplace. "You have to pull them in the right order. First this top one, then the middle one, then the bottom one." Daniel followed the instructions. The bricks came out with surprising ease, revealing a hollow space behind them. Inside was a small wooden box wrapped in cloth. With trembling hands, Daniel took the box and opened it. Inside was a large envelope and some documents. The envelope had Eleanor's name written in her own handwriting. Daniel carefully opened it and found several sheets of paper, a long, handwritten letter. "It's a letter from Eleanor," said Daniel, beginning to read aloud. "If you're reading this, then my final wish has been fulfilled. This house has been found by someone who values not just its walls, but the stories they hold. Throughout my life, I've kept this place as a sanctuary of my great lost love. Every room, every object, every corner of this house carries memories of William Johnson, the man I loved more than my own life. I was a coward. This is my most painful confession. I was a coward for not fighting for our love when there was still time. I let my family separate us because I was afraid of losing my comfort, my social standing, others' approval. And what was the result? I lost the only thing that truly mattered. I lost William. I spent decades trying to find him. I hired detectives, placed ads in newspapers, searched every corner of New York City. But it was as if he had vanished from the world. Only many years later did I discover that my own family had paid people to ensure William never knew of my searches. They blocked every attempt I made to find him. When I found out, it was too late. My parents had already passed, and I was an elderly lady without the strength to keep looking. So I decided this house would be my legacy. I leave it not to my niece Victoria, who never understood the value of true love, but to whoever finds it and cherishes its story. I ask only one thing, that the letters be read, that the paintings be seen, that our love story be known. Do not let William and me be forgotten. Do not let our love have been completely in vain. And if by some miracle William is still alive when this letter is found, tell him I loved him until my last breath, that there wasn't a single day I didn't think of him, that he was my greatest joy and my greatest pain, and that, if there is anything after this life, I'll be waiting for him. Eleanor Bennett." When Daniel finished reading, everyone was crying. William held Eleanor's portrait against his chest, sobbing like a child. "She looked for me," he repeated through tears. "She looked for me. I thought she had forgotten me, that she had moved on, but she looked for me." Daniel also discovered the other documents in the box. They were legal records, documents proving that the sale of the house had been completely legitimate, and that Eleanor had taken every precaution to ensure Victoria couldn't contest it. There was even a letter from a lawyer confirming that Eleanor was in full possession of her mental faculties when she made the decision to sell. "These documents save my house," said Daniel, relieved. "Victoria won't be able to do anything." But the most important discovery was on a last sheet of paper, folded at the bottom of the box. It was a will, handwritten by Eleanor and properly witnessed and notarized. In it, Eleanor declared her express wish that the house be sold to someone who valued art and love, and that any money remaining after the sale be donated to art programs for underprivileged youth. She explicitly excluded Victoria from inheriting the house, explaining that her niece saw the place only as property, not as a home. "This is final," said Margaret, reading the will. "Victoria has no chance in court now." Daniel looked at his grandfather, who was still holding Eleanor's portrait. "Grandpa, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay here, in this house? It was meant for the two of you." William shook his head slowly. "No, my boy. This house is yours now, it's your dream. But would it be possible for me to visit sometimes, just to feel her presence?" "Of course, you can come whenever you want. In fact, I have a better idea. How about you come live here with me? There are enough rooms. You could have your own space, and we could transform the house together into the studio." William's eyes filled with tears again. "You would do that for me? You're my grandfather, your family. And besides, I need someone to teach me how to really paint. I saw your canvases, Grandpa. You have talent, talent that shouldn't be wasted. And so William Johnson returned to the house where he had loved and lost Eleanor. Daniel took care of all the paperwork to get his grandfather out of the care home and bring him to live in Savannah. The room they had chosen for William had a view of the garden, the same garden where he and Eleanor used to meet secretly decades ago. But the battle with Victoria wasn't over yet. A week after the documents were found, she showed up at the house with her lawyer. "I've come to collect the documents you claim to have found," she said, her voice sharp. "I want them examined by independent experts." "Be my guest." Daniel handed over copies. "I have the originals stored in a safe place. They're authentic and notarized." Victoria's lawyer examined the papers with an increasingly grim expression. "Ms. Victoria, these documents appear legitimate. The will is very clear." "It can't be. My aunt would never do this to me. That man," she pointed at Daniel, "must have forged everything." That's when William entered the room. He had heard the argument from his room. Victoria looked at the old man without recognizing him. "Who is this?" "My name is William Johnson," said the old man with quiet dignity. "You don't know me, but I knew your aunt very well, better than anyone in this world." Victoria turned pale. You're the painter." "I am." "Then it's your fault. It's because of you that my aunt wasted her whole life. It's because of you that she was never happy, never married, never had a real family." "No," William's voice was firm. "The fault lies with the society that decided our love was wrong, with the family that thought money and status were more important than happiness. And yes, it's our fault too, mine and Eleanor's, for not having the courage to fight for our love when there was still time." "She loved me," said Victoria, but her voice wavered. "She dedicated her life to raising me. That must mean something." "She did love you," William agreed, "but not in the way you wanted. Eleanor loved you like one loves a responsibility, a duty. The love she felt for me was different. It was the kind of love that defines a whole life. And you, my dear, never understood the difference." Victoria looked around the room at the paintings Daniel had started hanging on the walls, at the documents scattered on the table, at Daniel and William standing side by side. And for the first time, something in her expression cracked. The mask of anger and indignation fell away, revealing underneath a deeply hurt and confused woman. "She really didn't want me to have this house," murmured Victoria, "or the memories, or anything." "She wanted you to be happy," William said gently, "but truly happy, not the happiness that comes from possessions or status. I think Eleanor realized you were trapped in the same golden cage that held her, and she wanted to free you in the only way she knew how." Victoria sat in a chair, suddenly seeming much smaller, much more vulnerable. "I don't know how to be happy any other way," she confessed, her voice small. "I was raised to value the right things: money, property, social position. My aunt tried to teach me other values, but I didn't understand. I thought it was her weakness, and now she's gone and I'm alone, without purpose, without direction." Daniel surprisingly felt compassion for the woman who had tried to take his house. She was deep down just another victim of the same cruel society that had destroyed Eleanor and William's love. "You don't have to be alone," said Daniel. "And you don't have to be without purpose." Victoria looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm turning this house into a cultural space, an art studio where I'll teach classes, hold exhibitions, tell the story of Eleanor and William. But it's too much work for one person. Your aunt raised you, so you must have learned things about this house, about its history, that no one else knows. You could help. Be part of this project." "Why would you do that?" asked Victoria, suspicious. "After everything I tried to do against you?" "Because I believe that's what Eleanor would have wanted. She didn't want to give you the house, but she wanted to give you something more important, the chance to find real purpose, to be part of something that honors true love, not empty social conventions." Victoria stayed silent for a long time. Her lawyer, realizing there was nothing more to do legally, said goodbye and left. She remained there, looking at the documents, at the paintings, at those two men who had somehow changed her entire perspective. "I need to think," she finally said, "about all of this, about who I am and who I want to be." She stood up to leave, but stopped at the door. Can I come back? To see how the house is coming along? To better understand what my aunt meant in her letter? The doors are always open, said Daniel. For you and for anyone who wants to learn this story. In the following months, surprising things happened. Victoria started appearing at the house regularly, at first just watching the renovation from afar. Then she began offering help, sharing memories of her aunt, showing details of the house that only she knew. It turned out that Eleanor had kept intimate diaries, which Victoria had stored in her apartment. When she finally brought them, Daniel and William spent entire nights reading, discovering even deeper layers of the love story. The diaries confirmed everything. Eleanor had desperately tried to find William for decades. She had spent fortunes hiring detectives. She had even gone to New York City several times searching for him personally, without success. And all because her family, even after her parents' deaths, had left instructions for people they hired to ensure William never knew about Eleanor's searches. Margaret also became a key part of the project. She knew all the old neighbors, all the street stories. She helped spread the news about what Daniel was doing with the house. Soon, people from the community began appearing to offer help, donate materials, share their own stories of frustrated love. It was Victoria who had the idea for an exhibition. William's paintings are incredible, she told Daniel one afternoon, and his story with my aunt is moving. We could hold an exhibition, tell their story through the canvases and letters. It would be a way to honor her memory and also officially open the studio. The idea caught fire. Daniel and Victoria worked together on the preparations. William, inspired by all the activity, began painting again. His hands were shaky with age, but the talent was still there intact. He created a new series of paintings, all inspired by his memories of Eleanor. The exhibition was scheduled for a Saturday in October, 6 months after Daniel had bought the house. The entire Savannah community seemed involved. Margaret organized an afternoon tea. Some residents offered live music. Others brought flowers to decorate. On the day of the exhibition, the house was transformed. The walls, now painted white, served as the perfect backdrop for William's works. Eleanor's letters were framed and displayed in special cases, preserved but visible. In the center of the main room, on a special easel, was the portrait William had painted of Eleanor decades earlier. People started arriving early. Old neighbors who had known Eleanor, young artists interested in the story, curious people drawn by the publicity Victoria had done on social media. Daniel moved through the house, welcoming guests, telling pieces of the story. But the one who attracted the most attention was William. The old man was dressed in a simple but elegant suit that Daniel had bought for the occasion. He would stand near Eleanor's portrait, telling anyone who would listen about the day he painted it. She sat right there, he would point to a corner of the room. The light came through the window so beautifully that day. She wore a blue dress, the same blue as the sky, and she smiled at me while I painted. Not a posed smile, but a genuine one, full of love. I tried to capture that love in my brushstrokes. Every color, every shadow, every detail was my way of telling her how much I loved her. People listened, moved, many cried. The story of William and Eleanor touched something deep in everyone. It was in the middle of the exhibition that an unexpected visitor arrived. James Johnson, Daniel's father, entered the house. Daniel didn't expect to see him. His father had said he couldn't come, that he had work. But there he was, his eyes red, walking straight to where William was. Father and son stared at each other for a long moment. Decades of pain, anger, abandonment, and misunderstandings hung in the air between them. It was William who moved first. He took a step toward his son, his arms outstretched. James, my son. And then James broke down. All the barriers he had built over the years crumbled. He hugged his father and cried for all the times he missed him, for all the birthdays without a gift, for all the school events where he looked at the door, hoping to see a father who never showed up. "You abandoned me," James sobbed. "I needed you and you abandoned me." "I know, son, I know. It was the biggest mistake of my life. But it wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I couldn't love anyone after losing Eleanor. And that's no excuse, I know. You were a child. You needed me, and I failed you. Why did you never come back? Why did you never try to see me?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you were better off without me." And the more time passed, the harder it got. How could I show up after years and ask for forgiveness? What could I say that would justify what I did? You could have told me the truth. You could have told me about Eleanor, about why you were so lost. I was a child, but I grew up. I could have understood when I got older. You're right. I was a coward twice. I was a coward when I didn't fight for Eleanor, and I was a coward when I didn't fight for you. Daniel watched the scene with tears streaming down his face. That reconciliation, that moment of truth between father and son, was as important as the entire house renovation, all the exhibitions, all the stories told. Victoria, who was on the other side of the room, also watched the scene. She approached Daniel. "I understand now," she said softly. "I understand why my aunt did what she did. She wanted stories like this to be possible. She wanted love and truth to win, even if it was late." "And you?" asked Daniel. "Are you at peace with all this now?" Victoria smiled, a genuine smile Daniel had never seen before. "I'm starting to be. I spent so much time trapped in resentment, in the feeling of having been rejected by my aunt, but now I see she never rejected me. She just wanted to teach me that there's more to life than I knew, and I'm learning, slowly, but I am." The exhibition was a huge success. Local newspapers covered the story. A radio station asked to interview William. Schools started scheduling visits, so students could see the studio and learn about the history. But the most important thing happened in the weeks following the exhibition. Daniel started giving painting classes in the house. William helped him when he had the energy, teaching techniques, sharing his experience. Victoria discovered she had a talent for organizing events and began planning regular exhibitions with local artists. The studio, which had started as Daniel's solitary dream, had transformed into something much bigger. It was now a cultural center, a meeting place, a space where stories were told and preserved. Margaret was always present, bringing coffee and cookies for everyone, happy to see the house finally full of life and purpose. She and William would spend hours talking about the old days, laughing at memories, crying over lost opportunities. Daniel, seeing all this, felt he had found something he didn't even know he was looking for. It wasn't just a space to paint. It was a family, a strange and patched-together family, formed by accident and fate, but a true family. One Sunday in December, Daniel organized a special lunch at the house. He invited everyone: William, James, Victoria, Margaret, the helpers who had worked on the renovation, neighbors who had become friends. The table was plentiful, full of homemade food. Everyone was talking, laughing, sharing stories. In the middle of the meal, Daniel stood up and tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began. "When I bought this house, I thought I was just buying an old property to renovate. I didn't know I was buying a history of love, of loss, of redemption." He looked at William. "Grandpa, through this house, I found you. I found a piece of my family history I didn't even know was missing. And more importantly, you found peace. You found a place where you could reconnect with the memories of Eleanor, where you could paint again, where you could be who you always were." He looked at James. "Dad, I know it wasn't easy for you to come here, to face the past, but you had the courage, and now we have the chance to build something new. We can't get back the lost years, but we can make the next years worthwhile." He looked at Victoria. "Victoria, you taught me that people can change. You started as my adversary and became my partner in this project. Through you, I learned about forgiveness and about giving second chances." And finally, he looked at Margaret. "Miss Margaret, you were the bridge between the past and the present. Your stories, your memories made all this possible. You are the guardian of the stories of this street, this community." He paused, emotional. "This house taught us something important. It taught us that true love never dies. It can be postponed, it can be frustrated, it can be buried under years of pain, but it never dies. Eleanor and William lost the chance to be together in life, but their love transformed everything around them. It transformed this house. It transformed our lives, and it will keep transforming the lives of everyone who comes through here and hears this story." Everyone applauded. William had tears streaming down his face, but he was smiling. "Eleanor would be so happy," he murmured, "to see all this." To know that our love, even as imperfect and incomplete as it was, created something beautiful in the end. The conversation flowed naturally after that. Stories were shared, plans were made, dreams were expressed. Daniel looked around the table and felt a deep peace. This was his place. These were his people. Later that night, after everyone had left, Daniel and William sat in the living room, each with a cup of hot tea. "Grandpa, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, my boy." "Do you still love Eleanor, even after all these years?" William looked at her portrait on the wall. "I do. I always will. But it's different now. It's no longer that desperate, painful love. It's a calm love, full of gratitude. I'm grateful to have known her, to have loved and been loved. I'm grateful that our love, even without the happy ending we wanted, created this space, this community, this family. In a way, Eleanor and I are finally together. Not physically, but through everything our love inspired." "That's beautiful, Grandpa. It's the truth, and you know, Daniel, I learned something important from all this. I learned that it's never too late to make things right. For decades, I thought I had missed my chance to be happy, to have a family, to belong. But here I am, at 86 years old, living in the house where I loved, surrounded by my grandson, my son, by people who care. Life has a funny way of surprising us. So you're happy?" William smiled. "I am happy, yes." Finally. The following months brought more changes. The studio gained regional recognition. Artists began seeking out the space to exhibit. Schools started including visits to the studio in their curricula. The story of Eleanor and William was even the subject of a documentary produced by a local university. Victoria, who had discovered a talent for management, officially became the manager of the cultural space. She organized events, handled the bureaucratic side, dealt with sponsors and partners, and in her free time she started painting too. She didn't have William's talent, but she had passion, and Daniel always said that passion was more important than technique. James started visiting more regularly. Gradually, the relationship between father and son was rebuilt. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and unresolved resentments, but there was also love, forgiveness, and a genuine desire to make peace with the past. It was on an April afternoon, almost a year after Daniel had bought the house, that something extraordinary happened. They were preparing another exhibition when an elderly woman entered the studio. She must have been about 70, with graying hair tied in a ponytail, simple but clean clothes. "Excuse me," she said timidly. "I saw the poster about the exhibition at the bakery. The story of William Johnson and Eleanor Bennett." "Yes, it's our permanent exhibition," said Daniel. "Feel free to look around. If you have any questions, we're here." The woman walked slowly through the room, looking at each painting, reading each displayed letter. She stopped for a long time in front of Eleanor's portrait. "She was beautiful," she murmured. "I never saw her in person, but my mother always said she was the most beautiful woman in Savannah." Daniel approached. "Your mother knew Eleanor?" "She did. My mother worked for the Bennett family for many years. She was a maid in the house. She was suddenly fired in 1958 without explanation. My mother was devastated. She needed that job. She had 3 young children to raise alone. Only years later did she find out the reason." Daniel felt a chill. What was the reason? Eleanor's family was eliminating anyone who could help her romance with the painter. My mother sympathized with Eleanor, thought their love was beautiful. Once she even helped cover for Eleanor so she could go out at night to meet William. When the family found out, they fired my mother immediately and spread rumors so no one else would hire her. "I'm sorry about your mother. She passed away 5 years ago, but she always carried that hurt. She said the Bennett family had been cruel, not only to Eleanor and William, but to everyone who dared to support them. When I saw the poster talking about the exhibition, I had to come. I had to see that their story was finally being told." The woman turned to Daniel with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for doing this, for not letting this story be forgotten. My mother would be so happy to know that their love is being honored." This was just one of the many visitors who arrived with personal connections to the story. An elderly man appeared, saying he had been a schoolmate of William's and remembered when he mysteriously disappeared from the city. A lady told how her grandmother had been a friend of Eleanor's and suffered for not being able to help her. Each story added another layer to the full picture. And Daniel realized that Eleanor and William weren't just two individuals in love. They were symbols of all loves that were prevented, of all the people who had to choose between heart and social convention. The workshop began receiving letters from people all over Brazil, letters sharing similar stories of lost loves, missed chances, regrets. Daniel and Victoria began archiving these stories, creating a living collection of romantic memories. William, seeing all that response, felt simultaneously moved and melancholic. "Eleanor would have loved this," he told Daniel one evening. "She was always generous, always wanted others to be happy even if she couldn't be. I think this space, these stories, are exactly what she would have dreamed of." "Do you think she knows?" asked Daniel. "Wherever she is, do you think she knows what happened?" William smiled. "I like to think so. I like to imagine she's watching all this and smiling that smile of hers, the one I tried to capture in the painting but never quite managed perfectly. And maybe, just maybe, she's forgiving me for being cowardly, for not fighting harder, for letting them separate us. Grandpa, you weren't cowardly. You were a victim of an unfair system. Maybe, but I always wonder, what if I had been braver? What if we had run away together when there was still time? Would we have been happy? Or would the reality of a life without money, dealing with society's constant judgment, have destroyed us anyway? There's no way to know. There isn't. And that's what keeps me awake some nights. The not knowing, the eternal what if. But then I look around. I see you. I see your father. I see Victoria and this wonderful space. And I think, maybe our love wasn't in vain. Maybe everything happened this way to bring us here." The conversation was interrupted by a doorbell. It was Victoria, arriving for the weekly planning meeting. In recent months, she had completely transformed. The bitter, resentful woman from the beginning had given way to someone lighter, more open, more human. "I have a proposal," said Victoria as soon as she sat down. "I've been thinking about expanding the project." "Expanding how?" asked Daniel. "Offering free art workshops for underprivileged youth, teaching painting, sculpture, other forms of artistic expression. Eleanor always valued education, and William knows firsthand how hard it is to be a poor artist in this country. We could give the next generations opportunities they never had." The idea was met with enthusiasm. In the following months, they worked together to structure the program. They secured some local sponsorships, material donations, volunteers willing to teach. The first workshop class began on a Saturday in July. There were 15 youths, aged between 12 and 16, all from underprivileged communities around Savannah. Daniel and William were the main teachers, with Victoria helping with organization and Margaret providing snacks. Watching those young people discovering art, expressing their emotions through colors and forms, was transformative for everyone involved. William, especially, was reborn. He had a natural gift for teaching, infinite patience with the students, an ability to see the potential in each of them. "You know, Daniel," William said at the end of the first day of classes, "I wasted decades not painting, decades lost in bitterness and pain. But now, seeing these young people teaching them, I feel I've finally found my purpose." Eleanor always said I should teach, that I had a talent for it. As always, she was right. One of the students, a 14-year-old boy named Jason, showed exceptional talent. He came from a very poor family, lived with his grandmother in a small house on the outskirts. But when he painted, he created works that touched the soul. William took Jason as his special protégé. He gave the boy extra lessons, lent him materials, encouraged his development. And Daniel saw something beautiful in the relationship between them. William was being for Jason the mentor he himself never had in his youth. It was Jason who asked, with the typical frankness of teenagers, "Mr. William, do you still get sad thinking about Mrs. Eleanor?" William considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes, I do. But it's a different kind of sadness now. It's no longer the kind that paralyzes you, that keeps you from living. It's a gentle sadness like missing something precious that's past, But at the same time, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for having loved and been loved. And gratitude for being here now, teaching you all, creating something that will last beyond me. Do you think she would have liked me? Jason asked timidly. She would have loved you, William smiled. Eleanor loved talented young people. She loved those who saw the world with sensitivity. You would have been one of her favorite people. The workshop program grew quickly. Soon there was a waiting list. Daniel and Victoria had to recruit more volunteer teachers and expand class schedules. The studio was always full of life, laughter, and creativity. And then came the moment everyone feared but knew was inevitable. It was on an October morning, almost 2 years after Daniel had bought the house. William didn't come down for breakfast. Daniel went up to check and found his grandfather still in bed, breathing with difficulty. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "I'm tired, my boy. So tired." Daniel called an ambulance. William was taken to the hospital, where doctors discovered his heart was failing. It wasn't something acute, they explained. It was just the natural wear of an organ that had been beating for over 80 years. William stayed hospitalized for a week. Daniel practically lived at the hospital during that time. James came from New York and stayed too. Victoria and Margaret took turns visiting, bringing flowers, reading to William, keeping him connected to the outside world. It was during this week in the hospital that William had his final idea. "Daniel," he called his grandson one afternoon, "I want to make one last painting." "Grandpa, you need to rest. I'll rest soon, and for a long time. But before that, I need to do this. I need to paint Eleanor one last time." Daniel looked at the doctors, who shook their heads no. But Daniel decided to go against medical advice. If it was important to his grandfather, he would make it happen. He got special permission to bring painting materials to the hospital room. Not a large canvas, just a small one, the size of a notebook. William, even weak, even with trembling hands, began to paint. It took 3 days. 3 days of slow, careful brush strokes, pauses for rest, moments where he seemed to be somewhere else in another time. And when he finally finished, everyone who saw the painting was speechless. It was Eleanor again, but not the young Eleanor from the first portrait. It was Eleanor as William imagined her now, in her late 70s as she would have been if she were still alive. The mature face, marked by life, but the eyes still full of that love that never died. And in the background of the painting, painted almost ethereally, was the silhouette of a younger man, as if it were a memory, a ghost from the past. "It's how I see us now," William explained, exhausted. "Eleanor old, but still beautiful. And me, forever stuck in that moment when I lost her, always that young, passionate painter. It's beautiful, Grandpa. It's my farewell gift. For you, for this house, for everyone who helped us tell our story." The doctors finally allowed William to return home to the studio. They said there was nothing more they could do. It was a matter of time. Daniel prepared his grandfather's room with great care. He put William's favorite paintings on the walls, arranged Eleanor's letters in a beautiful box beside the bed, made sure the garden was visible from the window. William spent his last days surrounded by love. James stayed with him, finally having the conversations they should have had decades ago. Victoria came every day, read to him, talked about the plans for the studio. Margaret brought homemade soups and sang old songs that William recognized from his youth, and the students from the workshops visited, bringing drawings and paintings they had created especially for him. It was Jason, William's young protege, who asked the question everyone wanted to ask but didn't have the courage. "Mr. William, are you afraid?" William smiled weakly. "No, my boy, I'm not. I've lived a long life. I wasted much of it, it's true. But these last years here in this home with all of you have been a gift. I found my grandson, made peace with my son, helped create something beautiful. And soon I'll be with Eleanor. I'll finally be able to tell her everything I never could say. I'll be able to hold her without fear, without shame, without the weight of the world keeping us apart. Do you believe that? That you'll meet her?" "I do. I need to believe. It's what keeps me calm now. The promise that our love will finally have the chance to blossom without obstacles." William passed on a Sunday afternoon, sleeping peacefully in his room overlooking the garden. Daniel was by his side, holding his hand. William's last words were, "Eleanor, my love, I'm finally coming." The funeral was simple but moving. Half the town seemed to be present. The story of William and Eleanor had touched so many lives that people who had never met them personally came to pay their respects. Daniel arranged for William to be buried in the cemetery next to Eleanor, not in her grave, which already existed in the area reserved for the Bennett family, but very close, so the two could finally be side by side, even if only symbolically. On William's headstone, Daniel had engraved, "William Johnson, artist, father, grandfather, and eternal lover of Eleanor Bennett." His love transformed lives and created beauty where there was only pain, finally reunited with his great love. The following days and weeks were difficult. The house felt empty without William's calm presence. Daniel found himself going to his grandfather's room many times, expecting to find him there before remembering he was gone. But life at the studio continued. Classes went on, exhibitions happened, new students arrived. And gradually Daniel realized that William hadn't really left. He was present in every brushstroke taught, in every technique shared, in every story told about love overcoming obstacles. Jason, William's young protege, took upon himself the responsibility of honoring the master's memory. He started a project documenting all the techniques William had taught, creating a manual that could be used by future generations of students. Victoria, seeing the boy's dedication, secured a scholarship for him at an art school in New York City. Jason accepted, but promised to return whenever he could to help at the studio. It was 3 months after William's passing that Daniel decided to pay a special tribute. He organized a complete retrospective exhibition of his grandfather's work. Not only the old paintings that had been found in the attic, but also the works William had created in his final years. The exhibition was an extraordinary success. Art critics came from São Paulo and New York City. A museum expressed interest in acquiring some pieces, but Daniel refused all offers. William's paintings would remain at the studio, where they belonged, where they could inspire new artists. William's last painting, the one he had made in the hospital showing Eleanor as an elderly woman, was placed in a central position at the exhibition, and next to it, Daniel had a plaque placed with the words his grandfather had said about it, "Eleanor old but still beautiful." It was during the opening of this exhibition that something unexpected happened. A very elderly woman, accompanied by a nurse, entered the studio. She must have been over 90 years old, bent with age, but her eyes were lively and alert. The woman walked directly to the last painting by William and stood before it for long minutes. Tears streamed silently down her wrinkled face. Daniel approached. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The woman turned to him. "I knew Eleanor," she said in a trembling voice. "I was her friend when we were young. We were schoolmates, and I knew William too. I saw when they fell in love. I saw when they were separated. And I saw how Eleanor never recovered. Have you been in touch with her all these years?" "Yes. I was one of the few friends Eleanor's family couldn't push away. I visited her regularly until she passed, and she spoke of William until the end, always hoping that one day he would return." The woman looked at the painting again. He saw her like this. Even old, he saw her as beautiful. That is true love. "Would you like to share your memories?" asked Daniel. "We're collecting stories about Eleanor and William." In the following days, Eleanor's old friend visited the studio several times. She told stories that no one else knew, about how Eleanor hid poetry books that William gave her, about how the two communicated through codes in the local newspaper notes, about the night when Eleanor decided she would run away with William but lost her courage at the last moment. "She told me afterward," the old lady recounted, "that was the decision that ruined her life, not having the courage to take that step. She always knew William would have taken care of her, that they would have been happy even in poverty. But fear was greater. The fear of losing everything she knew, of disappointing her family, of being rejected by society. And she never forgave herself for that, did she? Never. She carried that regret until the end. That's why she left the house to be sold. That's why she hid all those letters. She wanted her story to be known. She wanted others not to make the same mistake. She wanted love to be valued more than social conventions. These conversations with Eleanor's old friend gave Daniel more clarity about the studio's purpose. It wasn't just about art. It was about having courage. Courage to follow the heart, to challenge expectations, to choose authenticity over approval. He began to include this in his classes. He spoke not only about painting techniques, but about the importance of living a true life, about not wasting years on regrets, about valuing love and connection above status and social approval. The students, especially the younger ones, responded deeply to these lessons. Many came from families with rigid expectations about their futures. Some were pressured to pursue practical careers when they wanted to be artists. Others were discouraged from relationships that the family didn't approve of. "Learn from Eleanor and William," Daniel told them. "Don't let others decide your lives. Don't let fear steal your choices. Because in the end, what matters isn't how much money you have or what social position you've reached. What matters are the connections you've made, the love you've given and received, the authenticity with which you've lived." 1 year after William's departure, the studio had become a recognized institution, not only in Savannah, but throughout the mountain region. Schools from other municipalities brought students to visit. Universities used the story of Eleanor and William in studies about sociology and love in the modern era. Daniel, who had started that journey simply wanting a space to paint, now saw himself as the guardian of a much larger legacy. And he was at peace with that. He had found his purpose. James visited regularly, having finally made peace with his father's memory. He and Daniel had grown very close through that whole process. Father and son would spend hours talking about William, sharing memories, filling in gaps in the family history. Victoria had completely transformed. The bitter woman who had threatened Daniel at the beginning was just a distant memory. Now she was light-hearted, generous, passionate about the work they did at the studio. She had even started a relationship, something she had never managed to do before, a history teacher who attended the exhibitions and shared her passion for preserving stories. Margaret continued to be the informal matriarch of everyone. In her late 70s, she was always present, always with a wise word, always with coffee and cookies. She said that taking care of that project gave her purpose, that seeing Eleanor's house finally full of life and love was the best tribute her old friend could have. It was on a December afternoon, 2 years after buying the house, that Daniel finally felt he had completed what he had started. The renovation was complete. The studio was running perfectly. The stories of Eleanor and William were known and celebrated. Lives were being touched and transformed. He was sitting alone in the main room late at night after another busy day of classes and visitors. He looked around, seeing all the paintings on the walls, all the photographs of students, all the signs of life and purpose that filled that space. And for the first time in a long time, he thought about his own heart, about his own fears of love and intimacy, about how he had spent 40 years avoiding deep commitment, always finding excuses not to give himself completely. He thought about how Eleanor and William had lost their chance because of fear, and how they had spent the rest of their lives regretting it, and he realized he was following the same path, hiding behind work, projects, excuses. There was a woman, Emily, who regularly visited the studio. She was a literature teacher at a nearby school and brought her students for guided tours. Daniel had noticed how she looked at him, how she always found reasons to talk, how she smiled when he told stories about William and Eleanor. And he liked her too. He liked how kind she was to the students, how she understood the importance of the stories they were preserving, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about books and poetry. But Daniel was afraid to open up, to become vulnerable, to repeat his grandfather's mistakes. That night, looking at the final portrait William had painted of Eleanor, Daniel made a decision. He wouldn't waste his chance. He wouldn't let fear steal his happiness. He would honor the memory of Eleanor and William by being brave where they couldn't be. The next day, when Emily showed up with her class, Daniel asked to speak with her privately after the visit. "Emily, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for months." She looked at him with those expressive eyes, waiting. "I like you a lot, and I know you feel something for me too. At least, I hope you do. and I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. I don't want to look back 50 years from now and regret not being brave." Emily smiled, a beautiful smile that lit up her whole face. "I was waiting for you to find the courage to say that," she laughed softly. "I was starting to think I'd have to take the initiative myself. So you too?" "Me too." They kissed right there, in the main room of the studio, surrounded by William's paintings, by Eleanor's letters, by the story of a love that never had the chance to blossom. But now there was a new love beginning, a love that was learning from the mistakes of the past, a brave love. In the following months, Daniel and Emily began a relationship that grew naturally, without rush, but with depth. Emily became an integral part of the studio, helping develop programs that combined art and literature. She brought new perspectives, new projects, new energy. Victoria, seeing Daniel's relationship blossoming, commented, "Eleanor would be so happy. She always wanted her love to inspire others to be brave. And that's exactly what's happening." One day Emily had an idea. "Daniel, what if we held a ceremony, not a wedding, at least not yet, but a ceremony celebrating brave love, inviting couples who overcame obstacles, who defied conventions, who chose love over social approval. It could be an annual celebration, a studio tradition." The idea was met with enthusiasm by everyone. The first Brave Love ceremony was scheduled for the 2-year anniversary of Daniel buying the house. They sent invitations to the entire community, asking couples with inspiring stories to apply to participate. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of couples applied. There were couples who had challenged class differences, like Eleanor and William. Couples who had overcome age, race, and religious differences. Couples who had simply chosen love when the world told them to give up. The ceremony took place on a sunny Saturday. The house garden was decorated with flowers. There was live music, delicious food prepared by Margaret and her friends. And one by one, the couples told their stories. A 70-year-old black man and a white woman of the same age told how they had fallen in love in the 1970s, when interracial relationships were still heavily frowned upon. They had faced ostracism from both families, insults on the street, difficulties finding a place to live. But they had persisted. And now, 50 years later, they were still together, more in love than ever. A 60-year-old woman told how she had left an unhappy marriage in middle age to be with the true love she had found. She was called selfish, a family destroyer, immoral. But she knew she couldn't keep living a lie. And now, 10 years later, she was finally at peace with herself. A young couple told how they had faced family disapproval due to social class differences. His family was wealthy and didn't accept him dating someone poor. They had distanced themselves from the family, built an independent life. It was hard but worth it. Story after story, all echoing in some way the story of Eleanor and William, all proving that true love always faces obstacles, but it's worth fighting for. At the end of the ceremony, Daniel stepped onto the small stage set up in the garden. Every story we heard today is a testament to courage. Courage to follow your heart, even when the world says not to. Eleanor and William didn't have that courage when they needed it, and they paid the price for that. But their story, their love, continues to inspire others to be braver, and that's a beautiful legacy. He looked at Emily, who was in the front row. That's why, inspired by all these stories, inspired by your examples of courage, I want to do something. Emily, you changed my life. You taught me it's possible to open your heart without fear. That love doesn't have to be painful. That we can learn from past mistakes and create something new, something better. Daniel stepped off the stage and knelt before Emily. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life together here, in this house full of stories, surrounded by people who believe in true love?" Emily was crying, but she was smiling too. "Yes, yes, I will." The garden erupted in applause and cheers of joy. Margaret was openly crying. Victoria and her boyfriend were hugging and smiling. James had red eyes from emotion. And Daniel felt for the first time in his life that he was complete. The wedding was scheduled for 6 months later, enough time to plan, but not so far away that it would leave room for anxieties. It would be held at the studio itself, in the garden where Eleanor and William used to meet secretly. But before the wedding, there was one last important event. The city of Savannah decided to honor Eleanor and William officially. A plaque would be placed in front of the house, declaring it a cultural heritage site of the city, and the story of the two would be included in the educational materials of local schools. The plaque unveiling ceremony gathered hundreds of people. The mayor gave a speech about the importance of preserving local love stories. Teachers spoke about how the story would be used to teach courage and authenticity. And Daniel, invited to speak, shared how that journey had transformed not only the house but all the lives it touched. The plaque read, "At this site lived Eleanor Bennett, 1935-2023, whose love for William Johnson, 1939-2023, transcended social and temporal barriers. Their story reminds us that true love never dies, and that courage is choosing the heart over conventions. May this house forever serve as a symbol of love that overcomes obstacles." End of story. And you, what did you think of this story of love, courage, and redemption? Eleanor and William lost their lives together, but their love created something beautiful that continues to touch hearts. Daniel found not just a house, but also his family and true love. Tell us in the comments, would you have the courage to fight for your true love like Daniel did? Leave your like if the story moved you, and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories.